Good morning. Today we are going to talk about function parameters and returns. Okay, we have already learned about functions previously, but we're going to be learning about more advanced features of functions today. Okay, you have already used functions like update screen or create filtered lists in past lessons. Okay, these functions frequently use global variables that have been updated in other functions or set at the beginning of your code or updated in on events when a user clicks a button to achieve the desired result. Okay, so here's a short example from some previous code. Okay, so we have the global variable count, it's set to 0. And whenever the user clicks the up button, the code adds 1 to count. So it increments it by 1. And then it calls the function update screen. Okay, so right here, this is the function call update screen. Then down here, you have the function update screen. This is the function definition. So it calls that function, and inside, it's going to display the value of count. So it's going to access the global variable count within this function, and it's going to give you the desired result. Okay, so when the count is less than -10 or greater than 15, it tells you the game is over. Okay, that's just a very short example, but that is how we have used functions so far. Okay, so what we're going to learn today are some more advanced features of functions, and functions that use parameters that hold arguments and also return values can help us simplify and organize our code even more. They're going to allow us to make our code more powerful and generalize behavior. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So a function can be written in one of the following ways. So no parameters and no return value. That's what y'all have learned so far. It can have parameters, but no return value. It can have a return value, but no parameters. And it can have parameters and a return value. And just important note right here, functions can only return one value at a time. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. I'm going to go over the definitions for each of those things I just mentioned, parameters and return values, and also talk about arguments. Okay. Okay, a parameter is a variable in the function definition. Okay, it's used as a placeholder for values that will be passed through to the function. Okay, so here's an example of a function definition, function name, and in the parentheses, we didn't have anything in the parentheses before. We'll have parameters, parameter 1, parameter 2, etc. Okay, an argument is the value stored inside the parameter that is passed to the function when it is called from someplace else in the code. That parameter will contain the value, which will be used like a local variable inside the function definition. So here are two examples of when a function is called. Function name, 5, 2, function name, Mrs. Pasowitz. They can be of any type. Okay, a return is at the end of a function. The flow of control returns to the point where the function was called. A return command, when we haven't used those before, it's just return to the point of where it was called. But now we're going to use a return command to return a value which can then be stored in a variable at the point where the function was called. So here's an example of function name, parameter 1, parameter 2, and then inside of the function, this function is going to return the sum of those to some point. We're going to have more examples on the next slide so you can see what that looks like from the call and the definition. And just to note, the functions are also known as procedures, so you may see these words used interchangeably in AP questions. Okay, so here is an example 1. And then on the right-hand side is the code. This is a function with parameters, and the parameters are first and last. If you look at the function definition, first and last. The arguments to the functions, okay, were John and Smith, 2 strings. And then inside the function, it's going to take those. It's going to concatenate them together and print them out. There is no return value in this function display name. Okay, let's look at the second example. This is a function without parameters, and there's no return value. this is what you've done so far. This may look familiar. I create a global variable dog list. I get the column from my data, and then I create a global variable filter dog list, and then I call create filt list function. Okay, and then inside that function, you're going to use some algorithm to build your global variable filt dog list. Okay, this is what y'all would have done in the hackathon project before Christmas. Okay, example 3, a little bit more complex, a little bit longer code. Okay, this is a function with the parameters. Okay, add 2 numbers, has 2 parameters, num1 and num2. It is actually called twice in the code right here, add 2 numbers and add 2 numbers. Okay, in the first one, the arguments to the function are the values 2 and 3. And in the second one, the arguments to the function are actually the variables x and y, but those hold the values 1 and 2. Okay, and then also it returns the sum of 2 values stored in the parameters. So the first time it calls add 2 numbers 2 and 3. Those values are stored in num1 and num2. And then inside this function, it takes whatever is stored in num1 and num2, stores it in total, returns total. Okay, so it's going to return 5. Okay, and then 5 is stored back in sum. Okay, and then on the next line, that's printed out. So let's look at the next time it's called. It's actually called from inside console.log. So it's called with x and y, which hold the values 1 and 2. And then it adds those, it returns the total. And then the value that returned isn't stored in anything on this line, it's actually printed directly out. So it would just print out 3. Okay, so hopefully you can use this slide to refer back as you're working on the assignment for today. Okay, so what I want y'all do is you're going to go to lesson 2, and you're going to be working on level 1, which is a number cruncher. And then you're going to be working on level 2, which is called a word game helper. And the code is there. I'm going to hop over to in a minute. There is a Schoology document. And so y'all need to look at the Schoology document, answer the questions completely. It's going to ask you to modify the code for number cruncher. It's going to ask you to add a division sign and then add code to the calculate function to print that out. So you're just going to be adding a little bit more functionality to your calculate function. Okay. It would be nice if you added code that if the user asks to divide by 0, then you should not allow that. Okay. So let me hop back over here to parameters and returns. Okay. So you're going to run this. You're going to enter a number 5. You're going to hit the multiple sign. It's going to print out the result. So you need to look at your Schoology document, answer the questions about this code, okay? And then you are going to add a division sign and the code that makes that work. On number 3, you're not going to be doing any modifications, but you are going to be answering the questions about this code. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap this up. Okay, so procedural abstraction. This is something you're going to need to know for your PT, which we're going to be starting in just a few weeks, okay? You're going to have questions on the PT that you'll need to submit. You're going to need to submit answers to some questions, okay? So an abstraction is a simplified representation of something more complex. Abstractions allow you to hide details to help you manage complexity, focus on relevant concepts, and reason about problems at a higher level. Functions are reusable abstractions that reduce the complexity of writing and maintaining program. They are reusable because you can call them over and over again in your code. Okay, so that's the definition of abstraction. And what we're talking about in coding is called procedural extraction. Okay, so using parameters allows the function to be generalized. Okay, if I have a function called add 2 numbers, then in general, it adds any 2 numbers. So anytime I want to add 2 numbers in my code, I don't have to write out that plus sign a bunch of times. I can just call a function called add 2 numbers, give it my numbers, it calculates it for me. Now this may sound simple, but you might also have a function called calculate, a symbol, x1 and x2, and that could be used to add, subtract, multiply, or divide two numbers, okay, instead of having to write four separate functions. So you're going to need to have code in your PT that shows procedural abstraction, and you're going to need to be able to talk about that in your written responses for procedural abstraction. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a great day.